now joined by a man with direct experience of dealing with the Electoral Commission, Councillor Darren Grimes. Darren, I'm very grateful you've joined me, because it seems to me that the lefty Electoral Commission has been stunningly wet in this. When it was vote leave, you were absolutely dragged through a process that went on for years when you were ultimately completely exonerated.
That's absolutely right, Jacob. I thank you for shining a light on this two-tier hypocrisy, as you do almost every night. You know, the fact of the matter is that this is a two-tier government, a two-tier administration. What I remember quite vividly, I was in my early 20s. You don't forget your early 20s. They're meant to be some of the best years of your life. Well, actually, mine were made utter hell. You know, I was investigated 3 times by the quango known as the Electoral Commission. And former members of the Labour Party and current members of the administration and government right now, they actually claimed that I ought to have been jailed. You know, I was ultimately fined £20,000, which, Jacob, as you've just mentioned, is more than the £14,000 for 20 breaches. And there weren't 3 investigations. There wasn't a police investigation. The CPS weren't involved. There hasn't been a court case involved. And yet this led to a man being directly placed in number 10 Downing Street, the seat of power within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, does that not tell you that from everyone from Labour Party members, the members of this current government, to the Labour-friendly members of His Majesty's King's Council and all the rest of it, they're effectively a cartel, a cabal that says that if you have the right kind of politics, well, it's A-OK, Jacob. And that's the problem I have here.
Well, you get away scot-free, and that the donations were £700,000, were a much bigger sum of money than was involved in your case, that you were fined £20,000, which was then rescinded by the court. You were harassed by the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. None of this has happened. The Electoral Commission seems to have brushed it under the carpet, said nothing to see here, because it's their lefty friends.
That's exactly right. You know, over £100,000 of that coming whilst he was running Starmer's leadership campaign as well. And the Electoral Commission apparently gave a warning back in 2017. Well, Jacob, I never had any of that. You know, I was a student at the time, don't forget, of the Brexit referendum. I was doing this on my own. Well, they've had the whole apparatus of the Labour Party so-called moderates. I would argue with that definition, Jacob, as you well know. But actually, they had that warning. They had the legal advice. They had the advice to declare sums over £7,500, but actually they declared precious few donations. And the fact of the matter is, had this been a member of Nigel Farage's closest allies, getting Nigel into number 10, you can bet your bottom dollar that these very same people would be calling for Nigel's head.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And if you look at what Starmer said about Boris and about how the people who make the laws can't be above the laws, the hypocrisy of this is extraordinary. And it does come back to Starmer himself, because members of Parliament have to report support that they are given directly or indirectly. And as far as one can tell, and it's been admitted by Labour figures, Labour Together existed to get Keir Starmer to be leader of the Labour Party and get rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
Exactly. The polling, the research, the staff time, all of these things all add up to that apparatus, that machinery behind Sir Keir Starmer, which propels him into number 10 in a loveless landslide that was that election of last year. And ultimately, you know, all of these things add up. They have an effect. These are the things that they argued about our campaign for Brexit. But actually, all of the EU side, which had, of course, everything from Soros cash to the big vested interests as far as the Remain campaign's concerned, the Prime Minister of the time, let's not forget as well. None of those things had the same level of scrutiny applied to them. And that, I think, goes to the very heart of the issue here. Where is the scrutiny? Where are the members of the King's Council calling for actually there to be a thorough investigation into what actually went down? If they care about the sanctity of the ballot box, where are they now, Jacob? That's what I ask.
And this is a crucial test for the Electoral Commission to try and redeem itself, because the Conservatives have put in a complaint, and we'll now see whether they're willing to investigate Labour and senior figures in the government in the way they investigated you?
Well, Jacob, you are far too important to hold your breath. I shall not ask you to hold your breath because actually I think if you did, you'd be in a very dangerous territory. Ultimately, right, the same people that were leading the investigation into me, the 3 investigations into me, of which there was a court case and I was cleared by the police and the court, that actually they are now in positions of power and influence within the Electoral Commission. The entire Quango state is stacked against those with right of centre opinions. And I'm afraid that view of mine has not changed in the 10 years I've been active in politics.